Recording is on.
Florian, how are you? Can you hear me?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, good to see you again.
Awesome.
And Christal.
Hello, good seeing you. And there's Christal. Yeah, she's just over there, actually.
Super awesome to see the two of you again here.
It's good seeing you. Nice. I just watched the video that you did from your 66-foot yacht. That sounds awesome.
Yes.
Is that a new toy?
Yes. I found this beautiful yacht and I paddled around quite a bit. And it's probably big enough to seat. And then it just vanished.
What do you mean you found it? Like online somewhere, or you just literally found it?
No, it was just sitting there in the marina. So I paddled around on it for about a day or so, and then I left it there, and the next day it melted.
So you didn't carry it from somewhere else?
No, it was already there. I kind of created it with my ice saw. I mean, it was mostly there, but I just had to cut it away from the...
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering. That's a big piece of ice just swimming around there. You helped nature a bit.
Yeah, I had to, it was sitting there, but it was frozen against the dock, so I had to free it off the dock with I got a big, long ice saw. It was kind of a fun job liberating it.
And was that coincidence, or were you looking for something like that? Or you just showed up there for the video in the end?
I generally go growler boarding. So what I'll do is I'll look around. I kind of study the ice formations and figure out. I did my master's thesis on growler detection using radar and machine learning. And so we used to do this interaction with growlers. So we did a lot of waterhci back in the 1990s, using marine radar and tracking and sort of interactive growlers, so that we turned into a game kind of. In fact, you would like it because it's an exer game of sorts, an exertion game of sorts. What we do is we'll put a marine radar on each growler, and then we have a head-up display. So I've got here about a dozen or so head-up displays, underwater head-up displays. And what we do is each player has the head-up display on the Doppler radar. We're looking at the Argon plane, complex plane with the Doppler radar return. And the idea is to get the most, whoever gets the most Doppler shift wins, basically.
Cool. Talking about displays, because Christal and I were just talking, like the VR headset that you use in the pod. Was that actually one that you did yourself? Because we were trying to look for one. Yeah, we built it ourselves. How did you do that?
Well, I guess back in the day, we sort of had to build those ourselves. This is back in the 90s, in the early 90s, we made that VR float tank. And at the time, there wasn't very much in VR, so I've been building my own VR headset since I was about 12 years old in the 70s, And so using older technology. And then the technology's come a long way, because some of my old VR headsets, they were running on like 6,000 volts. And so that you really want the water to not be leaking into that. But now with the LCDs and everything, that technology came around. You had the backlight, that was still 480 volts with the fluorescent. But then, and now with LED backlighting, there's no voltage in there anywhere that's above 5 volts. So it's really wonderfully easy. Well, you still have to waterproof it, but it's just that the consequences of a leak are a lot less dire.
But I would have thought by now, with those advances, that we could actually buy one, but there doesn't seem to be any. I mean, I'm going to ask the Ballast how they did it, because they probably built their own too. I couldn't find anything. I would have thought that's like Kickstarter or something.
They did the same thing as I did. I mean, I look at their design and it looks awfully similar to mine. So they probably pretty much did the same thing that we did back in the 90s.
So it's still custom made.
Yeah. It'd be fun to collaborate, though. I'm thinking it would be fun to work with you guys. Like maybe we can do something together. I don't know. Who knows? But it would be fun to do some. I mean, I've got 2 float tanks here in my Toronto lab, and I've got every lab.
Are they still functional?
Oh yeah.
Good. Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, let's do something then. That sounds good.
Yeah, maybe we can collaborate on something, write a paper for something or somewhere, and build a. It'd be fun to kind of look at some of the things that you do as well. And Christal, it'd be fun to kind of get the artistic dimension of it too, and the performative art and athleticism in there too. Like maybe we could do something like an Exertion Games sort of VR underwater.
And yes, yeah, and Christal is doing, she's going to talk about that, has a slide for that, but she's also tried to do ocean rowing. So that's coming up. She's already training for that.
Oh, that's super awesome. Yeah, my daughter did a little ocean. My daughter was on the rowing, doing rowing, and she made a little thing. We wrote about it in the paper, and making an interactive rowing machine where you can collaborate. What she did is she made an erg. You know what an erg is, right? Practice rowing. So what she did is she hooked up a bunch of different ergs all over the world over the internet, so that you can row together. So people in all different places can pretend in virtual space, in the virtual reality, that they're all rowing on the same vessel, even though they're in different countries.
Cool, nice.
Yeah, she loves rowing, and she wanted to row with other people, and especially with like people in all different places, and you want a rowing partner or rowing companions.
Cool,
Yeah,
yeah. So it's like
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can send you
it's
the
like
link.
a peloton for rowing.
Yes. And what are you guys working on these days?
Say again, please.
We're pretty much ready to start. I guess we're at
Yes, yeah.
at the top of the hour. I might as well. So anyway, Christal and Florian are super smart, creative people coming in from Australia remotely. And that's kind of why we're this late in the evening. Normally a conference would end by 5, but we're trying to keep times that are friendly to people in other time zones. So waterhci has become now international, reaching across to different countries. So now it's great to bring them in. And Florian's been doing these Exertion Games and Exertion Games for so many years now. And Christal is joining this project as well with the kind of an aquatic performance side to it. So yeah, take it away.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to just work on trying to share the screen. Okay, so bear with me. All right, can everyone see?
Yes.
All right, let me put it into slideshow mode.
Yes, yeah.
All right, great.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'd like to just first thank Steve for inviting me and Floyd to this conference again. Floyd spoke last year, and so we're going to be presenting some work. We're presenting some work that we've been working on over the last few months. And Floyd, of course, is here, so he'll join me when we answer any questions you may have. So I'm going to share my pathway into waterhci first, and then go over some of the work we've started to do as part of my PhD and some of the implications of what we might do next. I'll start with my journey to waterhci. So right here you have a picture of Port James Beach in Antigua and Barbuda. This is where I grew up and learned how to swim from the age of 5. And I was there pretty much every week, and being there pretty much all the time, I eventually got to swimming at the Olympics in 2004. I became a swim and stand-up paddle instructor, a scuba dive master, and a kayak guide. I've done some recreational free diving as well, and I'm also an ocean rower. You can see here a picture of my Team Antigua Island Girls when we rode the Atlantic back in 2018, 2019. At the start of, we got into Antigua, back home into Antigua in 2019. And I've been working in the aquatic recreation space for quite a while now. And when the pandemic hit, that kind of all went to pieces. But that's also the time when I applied for the PhD with the Exertion Games Lab that I'm now doing at Monash University in Australia. And this was really exciting for me because it was a chance for me to pull together my very varied aquatic experiences with my background in sports development and sports science, and try to express all of that knowledge and apply it to technology, not just for athletic performance, but mostly for the joy of being in the water, which is totally my passion. So at Monash University, we have the Exertion Games Lab now, and Floyd has been director of this lab for quite a number of years. And in this lab, we look at the intersection of technology, play, and the body, and that kind of comes together as different kinds of exertion games. And my second supervisor, Sarah Jane Pell, is an occupational diver, an artist, and a bioaquanautic researcher as well. And together, they have guided me to ask the question, how do we design for interactive aquatic recreation? So the first thing we did, of course, was do a literature review. So we started, it was a group of us across quite a few different places. So Colombia, Canada, and where I was in Antigua, and in Australia. We started this literature review, and we looked at literature between 2010 and 2021, thinking that this would kind of just help us find a manageable amount of sources and papers to look at. And we covered the IEEE and ACM databases, as well as a sport-specific database, which is called Sport Discuss. And we did a bit of back chaining on those papers that took us back to 1996. So we ended up with 48 papers to analyze that covered systems that were interactive and had a full feedback loop to the user. So what we found was that we had 4 different kinds of technology that we identified. So we had tracking technology, where like mostly performance-oriented stuff like IMUs and sensors. We also had water vessels, which were like pumps and fountains. We had extended reality systems, which were, virtual reality and augmented reality, and we also found robotic systems as well. So this is kind of a timeline we compiled from 1996 to 2021, based on the papers we could find. And our first set of observations based on this timeline was that we noticed there was definitely an increased robustness of technology, and that translates to improved waterproofing for extended reality applications and tracking applications. But we also found that robotics seemed to be the least explored in aquatic recreation, at least. We know it has many applications outside of that, but because we're looking at aquatic recreation specifically, this is one of our findings. And we also realized that they seem to be a limited application and development of frameworks, which is pretty important when you come to theory development. And we also found a limited amount of user experience assessments. And because we are very interested in the experiential side of interacting with water and technology, this was important for us to consider. So our lab's questions, therefore, after considering some of what we found, we're like, okay, are we just taking water technology from land and putting it straight into the water? Are we considering the particular properties of the water and designing for those very dynamic properties? And then what does the user have to say about all of this? How are they interacting with the water? How they're interacting with water and technology? So these were some of our questions that guided the next sections of our work. And we were inspired a bit by some previous work. There's some prior work done on the 6 degrees of water contact that Floyd was a part of back in 2015. And what was useful about this piece of work is that it kind of identified different vicinities to water, which had implications for how we sense water and how as humans, and also how we sense water as well. Technology senses water and actuates in water as well. but we still didn't have an answer to how the user experienced the water. So we created a quadrant based on the fact that we know that water can be experienced positively and negatively. So on the x-axis here, we had this quadrant where we mapped water as a problem or opportunity for the user, and the y-axis where water is a problem or opportunity for the technology in a particular system. And that came up with 4 design spaces in that quadrant that we've named water as delight, water as enabler, water as challenge, and water as synergy. So with water as delight, that's in that upper right-hand section of the quadrant. And that's really about water being experienced as pleasure and surprise. And it generally takes advantage of the water's properties, like in how it communicates different information, whether it be temperature or a haptic sensation. And one really good example of this was a system called Liquid Touch, where it was a touch interface, but there was water that would, pressurized water that would spray out and give the user particular information based on temperature or the intensity of the jet. Then we also had water as enabler, which is on the lower right-hand side of the quadrant. And we found that water as enabler meant that persons would experience water giving them this extra support, typically using buoyancy. One of the systems that we really liked was Shark Punch, where as you can see, it's a augmented reality sort of application, or virtual reality one, and someone's just on the surface of the water, and they're using the punching motion to do rehab exercises, and it's much easier for them to do that with less fatigue than if they were to do that on land. And then we have water as challenge. This is where the water is experienced both as a problem for technology and for the user. And here, the key thing is for the user's abilities to match the needs of an activity in the water, typically a swimming activity. And technology here has the challenge of trying to reduce itself to reduce drag. So the more discrete a technology is, or sensor is, or actuator is, then the less drag there is in the water, and the more efficient someone can be when swimming, for example. An example of that would have been Moby Dick, which was an extra game for swimmers. And as you can see here, they had their system entailed having a pouch attached to the body. And of course, that will create some drag. But this is where we were in 2016. They were still didn't have everything that could miniaturize some of the water applications that we would like to see. So that was water as challenge. And the final quadrant was water synergy, which is where the combined effect of the water environment and human perception come together for a very interesting and unique experience. Specifically, we like the use of patterns and rhythms of the aquatic environment or the aquatic activity to inform a particular interactive system. So we have here an example of Gobi. And Gobi is a system that utilizes the standardized dimensions of a competitive swimming pool. So in most competitive swimming pools, they are standard widths and lengths, and there's generally a black line in each lane. And so when you're swimming for this system, it used computer vision as well as Bluetooth audio to tell blind swimmers if they were deviating from the black line, left or right, or if they're coming up to the T of the pool. To tell them that they have to get ready to do a flip turn. And this is just one example of using the aquatic environment, the predictability of an aquatic environment. And this was easily done in a pool, but in open water, it's a bit more difficult. However, open water environments also have their own patterns. And we can see that with rivers. They have rapid sections where it's quite high rapids, and then you have lulls. Even open ocean where you have surf, there are wave patterns to things. So this is an example of taking advantage of that. So what we found over the 48 papers was that water vessels seem to be used more for delight than any other technology. And so we wondered if combining water vessels with other technology is a good way to address that gap. We also noticed that extended reality systems seem to approach the water as a problem for technology. And we can understand that because of the antagonistic relationship usually between water and technology. But we wondered if we could use the unique properties of water to create novel experiences of immersion, and take a more positive view of it rather than, okay, it's a problem just to be overcome. So that orientation is something that we'd like to probably see more in the future. And we'd also like to see tracking technology not just overcome the water as a problem for the user, but use it to elicit water as delight and water as an enabler. We found very few systems that took tracking technology into those design spaces of delight and enabler. So moving forward, this framework that we've developed can be used as a point of departure. It's not foolproof because it's only based on 48 papers, but as a point of departure, we can kind of use it to identify different kinds of user experiences and anticipate what kind of user experiences a system might elicit, and can also help us with future systems in design considerations. So a potential use case for this, or a potential case study, is a Pacific Challenge that I'm going to be a part of next year with my rowing team who did the Atlantic, Team Antigua Island Girls. And we're going to be taking on this challenge next June in 2023. And that has brought us to try to consider what does it mean to design for water as delight, enabler, challenge, and synergy. We know that we'll cycle through many of those emotions over a period of time. It will take us about at least 4 to 5 weeks to do that. So it's an opportunity for us to think about how do we study in human-computer interaction in water and on the water in a vast ocean over a period of 5 weeks or 5 to 7 weeks. What kind of insights can we get there? So that's something I'm looking forward to working on. And I'm also looking forward to finding some answers to those questions at a workshop that we're organizing at CHI 22, so that's this year. That will be on April 13th. So Steve is actually going to be giving us a talk on the history and development of waterhci in that workshop. And we're going to be discussing some of the grand challenges within waterhci with the aim of producing a collaborative paper articulating those challenges. So if you are interested in getting more information about our framework, it's currently under review in 2 publications. And if you want some more immediate information about the framework or the workshop, please feel free to contact myself or Floyd. We will be here to answer any questions as we are now. So that's it for me. Thank you.
I guess you've reviewed quite a few papers on that, on challenges. Have you considered that things might be challenging and opportunistic at the same time, like that dichotomy might fold around, or I guess a lot of the work that I do often doesn't fit exactly these models because, like say for us, water is both challenging and fun and frolic as well too, right? Delightful and challenge at the same time.
Yeah,
Sublime is the word we often use, exhilarating and terrifying simultaneously.
Yes, Floyd actually has a word for that too, sublime. Being in the water, that kind of mixture of terrifying and exhilaration. So with this framework, I think we want to challenge it right now. We've come up with this, and it'd be good to test it against different systems to see, how does it actually play out over time? Because just because you rightly said, just because something may be in one part of the quadrant doesn't mean it's not necessarily in another part of the quadrant in another period of time, even in the same usage. I've noticed that with some systems, even over different iterations of that system, it can change quite drastically the kind of experience somebody has with that system.
For example, like just some of my own work, I guess I'm familiar with, like my sequential wave and printing machine from the 1970s. What quadrant does that fall in?
That's a swim system, yes.
That's a system
it's the acronym SWIM, yes.
Yeah, this system, the tray. There's the water tray. The vessel moves in the water tray. This is just a little setup of it, but we play it typically in a larger body of water. But the vessel moves in the tray, and it allows you to push the vessel back and forth and explore sonar waves interactively as they respond to a vessel. And the growler boarding is sort of built on that idea as well.
Yeah.
See, for me in that world, both axes are crushed. Like it's sublime to the user. It's both exhilarating and terrifying. You see, the growler, for example, lifts you and gives you buoyancy, but it's the precarity of it that makes it fun. The fact that your vessel can vanish at any time, break up or sink. And so it's sublime in the sense that it's at once empowering and makes you vulnerable simultaneously. Like if you've ever noticed how pleasure and pain fold back into a loop and sometimes become one and the same, in that same sense, the sublime nature of ice water swimming falls there. And so the sequential wave and printing machine, on the technological axis, I think it's folded there, and on the human axis, it's folded there. Actually, there's really three axes. You have, if you think of our three axes of one is humans, water, and technology. You can kind of think of a three-dimensional space. The water is on one axis, the human elements on the other axis, and the technologies on the third axis, and we can position ourselves into these octants. There's really eight. It's really three-dimensional. There's 8 octants, and so I don't know if you've, like, of the papers you've looked at, the 48. Do you have hydraulophone in there anywhere?
Yeah, we do. We have hydraulophone as water is delight. That's like one of our exemplar ones as well that we saw quite early on, and we're just like, yes, that seems to be a delightful experience. Very much so.
Fun. I guess water is fun. Water is delight. But also there's water as challenge, because a small hydraulophone is delightful, but we also, sometimes we'd like to do is to put a big 1.5 horsepower motor in there and turn it into an exergame where it's really hard to play, difficult, in which case then it becomes a kind of challenging hydraulophone. And that's why I was saying that if different iterations of a particular system, it changes the kind of experience it provides. So over even a period of time and different changes to the technology or however it's implemented can change that experience, definitely. Yeah, I'd love, if you want to, feel free to send me an early draft of some that I'd love to give my read on it in terms of, because I think the idea makes sense, but I'm just thinking that the labels of those three axes almost need to be more the amount of it than so much whether it's, because the valence of it, I'll call that valence, like whether it's terrifying or liberating, or because those valences can be confused and emotional, whereas if we put it into precise scientific terms, it might be easier to crispen or sharpen that distinction in terms of the axis labeling, if you will.
Yeah, they can certainly. Sorry, you go.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying. We also talk about in the that these can change over time, right? Like Christal mentioned. So we often see them that they actually move along an axis, like when you describe the sublime when going into open ocean waters. You probably don't have as much fear in the first 5 meters when you walk in, and you can still touch the ground, versus your element of fear is going to be much bigger when you're 200 or 500 yards out. So your systems can actually move within the design space as part of a trajectory of a user experience. So they start off somewhere, then they move, and then they might move back when you go back to shore. So,
but see, I think what makes swimming and water so compelling is that sublime aspect of it. Like, on the one hand, it's thrilling and fun, and on the other hand, here you're taking your clothes off and you're subjecting yourself to the elements, and your vulnerability really comes through. So I think that part of the pleasure comes from the scariness of it, or the dimensional. And Madeline and I have been talking about surfing the greats. Surf the Greats is a group that's geared towards surfing the Great Lakes. The Greats means the Great Lakes, for those who are not in Ontario. And Surf the Greats, it means surfing the Great Lakes. And the only time you can really surf them is in the winter, when the surf is surfable. In the summer, it's too calm. The storms are in the winter. And so you're surfing in sub-zero weather most of the time. So again, that is sublime. It is both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. It's wonderful at that vulnerable feeling of being in ice water. It's the terror of it that makes it fun, really. And so a lot of times we can't tell the difference between pain and pleasure, those of us who are into ice water swimming. And so it's really right on that edge. And I think Madeline can speak to that whole, to the sublime nature of surfing the greats. And so I think this is a perfect segue from what you're talking about, Florian and Christal, to what Madeline may have to say. And the other thing that Madeline really touches on is on beach access rights too, and that sort of thing. She's been involved in some advocacy to make sure that private property includes rights of way to access beaches. And don't know what Australia is like in that regard, but certainly here there's a lot of contention over access to beaches and private property versus public property. And nobody even knows who owns Ontario Place, whether it's private or public property. Nobody seems to be able to answer that question, let alone who to talk to about guaranteeing a right of way for beach access rights. But Madeline knows firsthand, A, what it is to surf the greats, and B, about a lot of the social issues that we're grappling with here. So take it away.
Thanks for the lovely introduction, Steve. Sorry I couldn't hop on a little bit sooner, but I'm happy to be here now. So thank you so much again for having me. Is my audio coming in okay? Like, do I sound good? You can hear
Excellent.
me? Okay, fantastic.
A bunch of subs behind you too. That looks great.
Yeah, thank you. I know I moved the laptop to the board section of the shop because
you know what? If you don't mind me giving that room a name, let's
Recording has stopped.
If you don't mind me giving it a name, let's call it the boardroom.
The boardroom. That's right. You're not wrong. Very important things happen in this room with the boards behind me as well. But yeah, so for those of you who don't know me and are joining the session today, my name is Madeline Leblanc. I am currently the general manager here at the store in Toronto called Surf the Greats. And as Steve already mentioned, Surf the Greats, our business, we started on promoting Great Lake surfing and the fact that we have a beautiful playground right here on all of the Great Lakes to be able to produce magnificent waves that we get to ride. But now we are slowly and quickly becoming Canada's surf brand. So it's really neat to see our business grow and reach people all over the country. We ship to BC. We have a huge surfing community out there in Tofino, as well as in Halifax and Lawrencetown. So it's been really neat to watch our business kind of grow and develop, not just from the Great Lakes now, but all over. I completed my undergrad at the University of Waterloo in Environment, Resources, and Sustainability, and just recently actually completed my master's at Brock University in Recreation and Leisure Studies. So I think this conference is kind of coming at a really cool time because my master's thesis research was about Blue Mind and getting kids on the water and understanding the relationship that we have with outdoor recreation, and if that relationship is enough to propel environmental stewardship, which is pretty cool, because I remember when I did that topic, a lot of my professors thought it was so unique and it was so different, combining outdoor recreation and environmental passions, but now I get to apply it to the job that I have here today at Surf the Greats, and through speaking with people like Steve on the phone a few weeks ago, just kind of coming across these really cool issues that we don't often have a chance to speak about. So I'm very honored to be here today to chat with you specifically about Great Lake surfing and the technology that we have to be able to help us chase waves here, to have fun in the water and be safe, even though it's a very cold environment, as Steve mentioned. But yeah, I guess, Steve, is there anything specifically that you'd like for me to talk about first? Because I know we talked about a few topics, so I wasn't sure which one you wanted for me to kind of dive into first.
Yeah, I guess wherever you can, you kind of got a sense of where we're at, and wherever you can be most heartfelt and passionate and whatever's near and dear to your heart, we'd love to hear about. By the way, just for background, we connected sort of because Surf the Greats, swim, drink, fish. Mark Matson has always been an advocate of Surf the Greats, and we're all looking for places to get things locally and support local businesses. So we've all been buying from Surf the Greats just because it's great to have a local aquatics-oriented business in the Toronto area. And so I bought a paddle recently from Surf the Greats, a really beautiful paddle that folds up into 5 pieces. It segments into really short. So when I'm not sure if there's growlers present, I always carry the little paddle in my backpack. And then if I'm not sure if the growler boarding is going to be good, if I know it's going to be good, I'll bring my full length wooden paddle that I made myself, which is sort of my preferred paddle. But if I'm not sure, I'll bring the little carbon fiber paddle that folds up small. And so that was really good. And other people, and in terms of buying suits and all kinds of stuff there. So it's really good. And then we got talking about some of the background and local community. I wanted to have a local component to the conference. So that's why we were kind of bringing in the Indigenous community, Indigenous art, local people, local industry, local governance, and so on. And local business, I think, is an important element of waterhci, water human computer interaction. So a couple of things that you touched on. One was you could tell us a little bit about your journey with access to the beach and that fighting that battle. And also your experience with, just surfing the Greats. I mean, is a wonderful. Even that collection of boards right behind you probably has a story to tell.
Absolutely, yes, definitely. A lot of people come in here and they see a board, and some people don't fully understand the meaning that can be behind them, but they definitely do. They've been to really cool places, have touched really cool waters, and definitely have been absolutely shredded by incredible surfers. But I think I can start with what we spoke about on the phone a few weeks ago. But Steve and I, it was really interesting. We were having a conversation, as he mentioned earlier, about Ontario Place and access there, and how swimmers are having a troubling time to be able to enter the water there peacefully and just kind of be able to participate in outdoor recreation in the way that they want to. And I had brought up to Steve that where I'm from, based in the Niagara region, so not too far here from Toronto, there's an incredible surf spot in Port Colborne, so just along the shores of Lake Erie. It's called Pleasant Beach, and I have been able to have some of the most incredible surfing moments and experiences of my life there. And if you know anything about the Niagara region and Port Colborne specifically, the city has about 5 to 7 roads that the very end of the road, it's an old country road, they're called Lake Window Access Points. So they are unofficial spots by the city that have been designated to allow people to enter the water there. So there are spots that are roughly about 500 meters just of sand, and it's a long little stretch that takes you to the water, and anybody can go there. So the public is allowed to go to be able to access the water. But more so recently, what has been happening over the past 2 years is that a lot of locals who live at the end of the road sections of Port Colborne, one of them being Pleasant Beach, is that they're complaining about things such as the public trespassing, or the public urinating on their lawn, or littering, and certain things that are disturbing, quote unquote, their peace. So the city of Port Colborne has been feeling, they're just like, you know what, we're getting way too many of these complaints. We need to do something about it. So they hired a company called Sierra Planning and Design to come in and to complete a survey, to talk to the locals, to really get a full comprehensive understanding of what is going on in these areas, and how can the city go about making a good plan moving forward that allows everybody to be happy, that allows all stakeholders at the table to be happy. But what I was explaining to Steve not too long ago is that the process in which that this has been happening hasn't been allowing all stakeholders to be at the table, to be a part of the conversation, to move forward with what to do with the end of these road section areas. Because if I could paint a picture, basically what it looks like is you drive down the end of this road and there's maybe like 3 or 4 parking spots. Like, there's not really a lot of parking there. By law does not consider them parks, so there's no washroom facilities. There's no really good comprehensive facilities to be able to allow people to kind of hang out there and to really enjoy the full capacity of these spaces. They are literally just wide open spaces that allow you to get on the lake and get off the lake. So moving forward, Sierra Planning and Design last year, 2021, completed a survey within, I'd say, like a 50-kilometer radius of the shoreline of Lake Erie that also touched the end of these 5 to 7 roads approximately. And the survey, which then included locals, cottage owners, and a few residents of the United States, because a lot of people who own property along the shoreline are Americans. So they completed the survey and found that the general consensus was that most people in the area wanted the end of these roads to be only private property. Like, they basically said that we don't want the public here anymore. We don't want people in our backyards. We want to make this more privatized so that we don't have to deal with all of these issues going on. So after the survey was completed, Sierra Planning and Design, at the end of 2021, so in December, they released a report stating that this is all of the information that they collected. This is all of the data that they have from the city legally to prove that the end of these roads are not legally, like, they're not legally parks, and they are public spaces, but they're not privatized. And the report then also included other propositions that the city could implement and locals could implement as well to make these places better. And it was presented at a city council meeting on December 6th, 2021. But a lot of people who actually use the area besides locals, so other outdoor recreation enthusiasts, had no idea that this was going on. So nobody was there, nobody could speak to this meeting. So a finalized proposal plan came out after the meeting in January of 2022. So literally just approximately almost 3 months ago now. And the plan proposed that the city of Port Colborne could sell the ends of these roads to make them then privatized, and so that the city would not have to designate them as parks. And if the city were to designate them as parks, that would basically mean that no one then would, the city would have to provide washroom facilities. They'd have to provide garbage bins and certain other services to make the area more accessible, which would then in turn cost the city money. So, long story long, basically, other outdoor water recreation enthusiasts were not brought to the table to begin with. A lot of people didn't understand that this was going on, that there was local frustrations besides the locals. But from my personal experience as a surfer here on the Great Lakes, I know that people from all over, especially people from Toronto and the GTA, they come down, they drive down to this small, tiny road to park in those 3 or 4 spots that are available to be able to surf the incredible waves that are available at the end of Pleasant Beach Road specifically. So we got frustrated as surfers, specifically one population of that group. And because we kind of made our voices heard online, we took to Instagram, we took to Facebook to be able to make our opinions heard. The city of Port Colborne then allowed the general public to be able to submit a statement regarding the report that was put out into the public. So the report was released and the city said, hey, if anybody wants to make a comment on it and put it in their opinion, you're allowed to do so. You can do this until February 28th, 2022. And that's what a lot of us did. So the surfers kind of rose up and everybody made their opinion very well known. I myself wrote almost like another master's thesis, it felt like, putting in my statement and my personal opinion on how these areas should be designated and allowed to be kept public so that people like us who are passionate about the water and who need the water to be able to heal, to be able to exercise, have fun, tap into our own blue mind, for us to be able to use these spaces and still have access. So it's been an ongoing battle. The city of Port Colborne met again on March 22nd this year. So I guess that would have been last week. And I sat in on that meeting, and unfortunately nothing was brought up. There was no discussion about the end of the road study. That's what they're calling it, the end of the road study. That's the official report. So I'm still kind of waiting to hear back. I've subscribed to the city of Port Colborne, so I'm hoping to sit in on the next meeting and the discussion comes up again. But in accordance to what Steve and I were talking about, we were just bringing home the point that it's important for us to have these spaces, for us to be able to be creative, and for us to be able to tap into our own wellness and our being, to be able to escape, the city life and the struggles of every day, and have a place that makes us feel good and happy and at home. And another point that I didn't mention earlier, but I am also a professional stand-up paddleboarding athlete. I'm sponsored by a company called Starboard, and some of my earliest training sessions ever, like just getting out onto the lake, happened at the end of that road. My very first surf lesson too, with Surf the Greats, when Surf the Greats first became established, was back in 2017. And same thing, it happened at the very end of that road. So I could go on and on, Steve, about about Pleasant Beach and what's happening there, but I think that's probably a good summary to stop there.
Yeah.
But,
well, in response to kind of what Christal and Floyd were saying too, Pleasant Beach, it's a beautiful name. It suggests pleasance. It's both, again, that could be both ends of the spectrum, because Mount Pleasant Cemetery, Pleasant is often the name of a cemetery. And also we could have a very unpleasant experience at Pleasant Beach. So there's pleasure and pain rolled into one, because you've got to fight for something. And this is a perfect example of where you've really got to stand your ground, I think, and hold accountable the forces that would try. And another question too. I wonder. You see, we always wonder what happens if you get third party. Like a lot of times they say, well, we don't have a budget for washrooms. I wonder what would happen if we did a little fundraiser and raised funds to put washrooms there. I wonder what they would do. I wonder if that would be considered vandalism to put washrooms there.
I'm not sure because again, legally the area is defined as public property. But yeah. So I don't know.
Because this is what I see a lot of these communities are taking this approach of what they call planning by doing, or placemaking is the name for it. It's called placemaking. Like it started out when somebody started putting signs on the street, on lampposts that say walk this far to here, walk this far to there, and they're unauthorized. And some people said it was vandalism, and other people said it was great public service. But the trend caught on, and the city started doing it. So I think that you're kind of at a pivotal moment, I think, where you could literally affect public policy. Like you've got maybe a unique opportunity to really take ownership of this space, and kind of like if you look at Ontario Place, it was an abandoned amusement park, and then a bunch of swimmers kind of got together and decided to kind of advocate for swimming there. And what you need is advocate for surfing at the ends of these roads. Like you what you almost need is to have like surfing competitions there, or have some kind of public outreach that like you need a name for it almost. Like our things are called swim ops. We have a swim op. OP stands for Ontario Place, so we have swim op. But you need maybe surf like Surf Pleasant or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking of some. You need a catchy name that you can say we're going to do a pleasant surf, or something like that. How about pleasurf?
Pleasure. Yeah, that's not bad.
And I'll coin a new word called plesurf. Plesurf. And then you can say we're going on a plesurf. We're going to go plesurfing, and make that a verb and a noun, and start pounding it out on social media, and you get people every day. Everybody who surfs there say post a plesurf, #plesurf, and show it as public good. I like where you're saying that it is a healing, because as soon as you talk about it as a medical necessity rather than a pleasure or recreation, it has more teeth. Like one of the things I found with my hydrolophone, my underwater pipe organ, a lot of pool owners said that's not allowed here. Like they would not let me bring it there. And I said, well, what is it that's not allowed? And they didn't know what it was. So they'd ask me, what is it? And there's any number of things I could say what it is. If I say it's a musical instrument, they'll say, well, you're not allowed to play musical instruments here. If I say it is a pool toy, then they'll say, well, only Coast Guard approved flotation devices are allowed. Or they might say, I've had people say, well, you're not allowed to bring, can't bring their own toys because it'll confuse with our toys, or whatever it is. So the one that I found works the best is when I call it a physiotherapy device, because we do use them for physiotherapy, and we have a lot of deaf-blind users who use them for rehabilitation. So we do often use them for rehab. So it's one of many things. But now, if I call it a physiotherapy device, so a lot of times when I go to the pool, when I went to Stanford University as a professor there, I walked in with my hydrolophone to the pool. After the very first day I walked in and said, I have here my physiotherapy device, which I want to use in the pool. Is there any place I should use it so I'm not bothering anyone or obstructing traffic? And I just explained to them, I want to play my physiotherapy. I want to do my physiotherapy in the pool. And who would not let somebody do their physiotherapy in the pool? So I like where you're coming from, healing, because you could say, and I like what one of the other speakers said about prescribing. I think it was Pierre Lafontaine. He said, what doctors should do is prescribe swim lessons. You should say, oh, your kid doesn't know how to swim, so here's a prescription for swim lessons. So what we need is a prescription for ice water immersion, or a prescription for balance therapy, because standing on a surfboard is a form of physiotherapy exercise. So if you had a prescription for this, you could turn to the city and say, okay, I need to fulfill this prescription. It's a medical need. Where should I do it? there is a place called Pleasant where I could do it. Should I do it there, or can you provide me with an alternative place? Say, okay, if you want to close Pleasant and build me a large pool with a big wave machine so that I can surf there, maybe that's okay too. But if you don't have the resources to build a big pool, a huge wave machine, so that I can do my medically necessary exercises, then at least allow me to use the facility that already exists by nature.
Absolutely, Steve. I think that's such an incredible point, because when I was doing my master's last year at Brock, and I was researching stand-up paddling articles specifically on people's well-being, the research wasn't there. It's not quite there yet because the sport is still so young and the activity is still so young. It's growing and it's gaining popularity. But there is research on surfing, and there is research on doctors prescribing surfing to people to be able to heal and to have access to the water in a very unique and meaningful way. And that's exactly how we are approaching the city of Port Colborne. We're not coming at it from an aggressive standpoint or localism to say, hey, like, you know, we just want this to surf and to play. No, it's actually, it goes beyond that. It goes into the concept of blue mind, which basically explains the neuroscience behind why humans feel better when they're on, in, or near the water.
Yeah, I guess you're talking about Professor Wallace Nichols' work on neuroscience, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Oh, I've read that book front to back. We sell it here at the shop in case anybody's
wondering.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get on that frame, if you're going to adopt that framework, what you need, I think that's a great idea. I think if you can get a whole bunch of surfers to ask their doctor to write a prescription for them, absolutely beautiful. What he's doing is absolutely breathtaking, because he's right into the standards, and you know, he's president-elect for this Standards Association. I think there's at least a few hundred of us who would like to vote for him in keeping this. So remember, this is all about politics. We need people in places of power and influence who believe in our ideals, and this is why we should all get out and vote and get the right people in the right offices, so that our efforts and so on have impact in the world. So yes, I don't need to say too much more. He's a genius, he's a polymath, he's a super smart guy, and he's politically active in all the right ways. So take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Could you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. It looks fantastic.
Okay, great. So, thank you for inviting me to give this talk. Actually, the topic standards for waterhci is sort of new to me. I think I'm familiar with HCI, but I really didn't think about water and think about water and HCI together previously very much. So I try to share some thoughts on this. Probably, I think that could trigger more ideas from the audience. So briefly introduce myself. I actually, like Steve mentioned before, I used to serve as the chair of the IEEE Digital Sciences Initiative, which is basically about IEEE activities around VR and AR. And after that, I'm still I have been serving on other roles, including chair of the IEEE VR and AR Standards Committee, and also the IEEE the chair of the VR and AR Advisory Board. So starting from last year, I put my name in the election, and I won the election. So I have a new role. Director-elect of the IEEE Board of Directors, and also the President-elect of the IEEE Standards Association. So that's about me. But before I share my opinions, this is what I have to do. It's a formality that the opinion here will be my opinions, not necessarily the opinions of IEEE or IEEE Standards Association. Okay, so let's have some fun. So I'd like to talk about in the context of water, I'd like to talk about the reality, because water is definitely a very important, very integral part of our reality. So what is reality? This is my theory. Well, I believe many of you will agree with that. So reality is basically not simply the world. The reality is based on our senses and actions on top of the world. So George Berkeley used to say that to be is to be perceived. That's why we will say that reality is the world is not we cannot say that the world that we are feeling is the reality. Reality is basically the combination of our senses and the senses actions and the world. If the world is really an objective thing. So if you agree with this logic, we could say that the ultimate virtual reality would be virtual senses and virtual world. So we have two dimensions to progress. One is to improve the virtual senses and actions. The other dimension is to improve the virtual worlds.
Oh, is the slide supposed to be advancing? Because we're still on slide 1.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, probably I should do the sharing again. Let me try. Okay, let me try to do the screen sharing again. Hope that will be okay. Well,
Good. What's great?
Okay, so this is what I just mentioned. Reality should be the combination of senses plus actions and the objective world. If we can still say that the world is objective, based on what George Berkeley said before, to be is to be perceived. With that, we could say that virtual reality, we have two dimensions to develop virtual reality. One is to develop, improve virtual senses and actions. The other is to improve virtual worlds. So with that, we can think about what would be the ultimate VR experience. Ultimate VR experience would be, in my language, would be indistinguishable virtual senses and actions and self-consistent virtual worlds. So what is indistinguishable virtual senses and actions? Let me give you an example. That example would be drinking beers. I will explain that a little bit more later. And with regard to self-consistent virtual worlds, swimming would be a good example, and it's also a big challenge. So let's talk about drinking beers. Imagine how we can mimic the experience of drinking beers. You drink beers with your friends in a bar, physical bar. That's of course very enjoyable. But how about drinking beers in a virtual reality setting? So far, you can imagine that, well, probably we can mimic the look of beers. We are still in a very early stage, but we are on the way to be able to mimic the smell and the taste of beers. But how about dopamine? So we still cannot mimic that. Even you have virtual look and virtual smell and the taste of drinking beers, our current virtual reality settings, even in the foreseeable future, will still be far from being able to give you the feeling like you when you drink after you drink a real beer, you will get high, but in a virtual reality environment, in the foreseeable future, we are still far from that. So this is sort of I use the concept from Steve's website. This is talk about the drink water in humans. So this is a good example when we want to talk about what would be the ultimate virtual reality, especially in terms of virtual senses and actions. And so what's the reason is that currently the virtual reality senses and actions are outside of human organs, which means we mimic the lights outside of our eyes, we mimic the sounds outside of our ears, and we try to mimic other senses like touch, like smell, and taste outside of our hands, our mouth, tongue, things like that. But even we can do all of this, we are still not able to, with all those kind of virtual inputs, we still cannot do the virtual feeling of drinking beer and getting high. So the solution could be ultimately we need to move the interface from outside of the human body to inside human body, which means we need to have direct interface into human brain. It's the brain-machine interface or brain-computer interface, which is the only possible place that we can directly interact with your consciousness and trying to be. Well, I still don't have a clear answer, but I think theoretically, direct interaction with your brain would be the only way to directly interact with your consciousness, which means there will be it is possible to create or mimic such kind of feeling of drinking beers and getting high, just to name a few. So that is one part in distinguishable virtual sense interactions. Let's look at another example, swimming. Many people enjoy swimming. I know Stefan does that. I watched your video on your 66 yacht. That is fantastic. But as in our current virtual reality industry, just imagine when we can let you swim in virtual water. That is a very big challenge. That not necessarily only means that you need to simulate all kinds of feelings of your body inside the water. That also means we need to synthesize the water to the very fine grade. So that's another challenge, which means that the virtual water should not just be appearance, should not just be ray tracing, such kind of rendering thing, but it should be physically consistent. It should be physically consists of atoms or particles. That's what we call self-consistent virtual worlds. So there are some early stage efforts towards that, but it's still far from mature. Like the early example, Second Life. Second Life allows you to build use small building blocks to build bigger things, and other famous examples like Minecraft and another startup company, Improbable.io. All these examples are engaged in how to allow users to create bigger objects with smaller building blocks. So that is a very important direction, but we are still far from being good enough to create the virtual swimming experience. So these are two grand challenges in our current, I would say, the virtual reality industry or VR industry. With that, I would like to mention the role of standards. So we used to say that the typical path of doing standards is let's wait and say when the market, the industry are mature enough, then there will be bottom-up standardization needs. There will be bottom-up requirements to say that, hey, we need some standards. We have some issues in terms of the interoperability. So we need some standards to connect the things together. That's an old school way. But in recent decades or at least recent years, many SDOs, including IEEE, have observed a new trend, which means that standards sometimes should be developed before the technology or the industry is mature enough, which means standards could play a leading role for the ecosystem, for the technology advancement, and so on. So that's why I put a slogan for our IEEE VR and AR standards committee. I said, paving the roads to different worlds. Here, different worlds means different virtual worlds, of course. So what we have now is that we have two working groups under us. One is called the Virtual Reality and Augmented Reality Working Group, which is directly led by myself, developing some fundamental standards for VR and AR. And there is another working group named AR on mobile devices. That is led by a company an AI company led that effort. They are developing some specification for AR on your smartphone, things like that. And we also have another two activities. One is called the VR and AR Advisory Board. Steve is on that board as our advisor. So thank you again for your support. And we have another one, we call that the Global Initiative on Ethics of Extended Reality, which is addressing ethic issues for extended reality. So that's our current setting, but I'm not saying that we are addressing those, directly addressing those grand challenges. Those are my opinions, but I believe, especially for, let's go back, talk about self-consistent virtual worlds, we probably could have some innovative standards to support such kind of things, like the standards for smaller and smaller building blocks. And as regard to the first grand challenge regarding how to create a virtual reality of drinking beer, I would wait and say when we have some breakthrough, we will have some new advancement in the field of neuroscience, excuse me, or the interdisciplinary area of neuroscience and computer science. So with that being said, I'd also like to give you some heads up. All of you have been, I believe, observed that the metaverse is a very hot topic recently. But still, there is no commonly agreed definition for metaverse. So this is my definition. I have been working in the VR industry for many years. So when the term metaverse got lots of attentions, I have been asking myself, which part or which aspect is the concept of metaverse is that not fully described or not fully expressed in the context of VR that we have been using for decades. So my answer is persistent. So when we are talking about virtual reality, it could be some one-time experience, but when we use the term metaverse, it's supposed to be persistent. So that's why I created a new term. I created a new term, persistent computing, which means the technologies to support persistent virtual worlds. And of course, the persistent virtual world should be self-consistent, like I described before, which means a persistent virtual world should have its own physical laws, should consist of smaller building blocks. Building blocks interact with each other to constitute the larger world, larger objects, and the gratitude of the size of the building blocks should get in along with our technology advancement. The size of the building blocks should get smaller and smaller. Currently, we can do like bricks level, but later could be at the sand level or eventually at the basic elements level. So that's part of the basic the infrastructure for metaverse. And we also need, like I mentioned before, we also need some breakthrough in terms of the brain-machine interface, so we can mimic comprehensive virtual senses and actions. Recently, some of you may also have heard about many people are associating the concept of metaverse with another concept. They call it either Web3 or NFT. To me, I think that is helpful because blockchain and the digital assets and the NFT could provide some assistance for the advance of metaverse, especially in terms of public acceptance and active economy assistance. But they are not necessary; they are just helpful. So this is my restricted definition for metaverse. Is basically comprehensive virtual senses and actions based on persistent virtual world, and also digital assets and NFT also based on persistent virtual worlds. Only based on persistent virtual world, such kind of digital assets would be meaningful, would be valuable. Otherwise, it would be just some they just want to get your money, but you get nothing. So that's most currently for today. Many NFTs are just like, in my eyes, just with no value at all. But in a persistent virtual world, such kind of digital assets could be having some value. That's my opinion. Also, I have a more broad definition for metaverse. This is my general definition. So we have been talking about the digital transformation. So I think we have seen that many vertical industries, utility, manufacture, agriculture, lots of vertical industries are subject to, are currently under digital transformation. And I think the advanced phase of digital transformation is actually metaverse, because after that, the entire human society and our work and life will be highly digitized, digitalized. So that would be the ultimate vision for metaverse. So I'd like to just to give you a heads up, I'm working on establishing a new effort called Open Metaverse Initiative. That would be a combination of an alliance and also a DAO, the decentralized organization. So for today, this is only thing I can give you a heads up. Coming soon, we will have the Open Metaverse Initiative very soon, and we will have a right event to announce that shortly. So before I take questions, lastly, I welcome all of you to contact me for participation and collaboration. So here's my contact information, my email, my LinkedIn, my Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm not really active on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm trying to do so, but I'm now checking my LinkedIn on a regular basis, and email, of course. Email is the best way to reach me. So that's my report today, and I assume I can take some questions.
Excellent. That was a fantastic talk. That was really, really good. Nice to see kind of the beer example is really amazing, because I think that really cuts to the core of what VR like challenges, like if you look at grand challenges. So we often talk about simulating a swimulator. We call it the swimulator, which is simulating going for a swim. And this is really good here. These two examples are great, because we often talk about like if I go for a vacation somewhere, let's say I travel somewhere, if I just look around, a lot of people travel somewhere, they get an airplane, go somewhere, and they just look around, they go sightseeing. I always want to jump in the ocean or jump in the lake. When I went to Italy, they said, oh, all the beaches are closed because it's winter. And I said, oh, why is that? And they said, well, the water's too cold. So I stripped down and jumped in, and the water there was warmer than it ever gets here. And they still said it was too cold. Same in China. When I was in China in December, I think they said the beaches are closed because it's winter. And I said, oh, I still want to swim. So they actually, there's a guy there who's the Chinese equivalent of the Navy SEALs. I guess they have their top Navy trained swimmer. He accompanied me for a swim. I guess they didn't want me to die there or something, but but yeah, we went for a great swim. And so that's when you're sightseeing, you want to actually swim because you can see it. And when you think about the beers that are available in different places too, a lot of people talk about the different local cultures, the food and the wine and everything. So like having a really nice steak dinner, or a really nice, even a traditional, like when we're in China, we'd often go and have a really nice fish, where you pick out the fish, choose one, and then they cook that for you and bring it the whole fish nice and beautifully. And we'd be in a spa there, where you're in a spa facility and you're soaking in all these different tubs, and then you go over and have the fish. And so you get both of those. I guess a spa is one place where you get both of those. When you go for a spa, you can be sitting in a hot tub, drinking whatever. And so you get the water inside and outside of you. And it's really, how could you get a virtual reality experience that would take you to like a Chinese spa facility where you've got that great fish to eat while soaking in a wonderful bath or something like that? It'd be very hard to get that in a VR environment.
Yeah, that's true. I like spa too. Yeah, spa is another very good example. Yeah, it's very hard to implement in VR.
Yeah, and just the experience of, like, say, selecting a fish and then having it prepared and brought for you and actually eating it. I can't imagine how you'd implement that in VR, like that spa experience. So those would be indeed grand challenges. And standards are the other thing too, like what are the standards for all these things? How do we make things interoperable so that these experiences, these metaverse experiences are swappable? And to me, the metaverse is immersive. And so what's more immersive than going for a swim? I can't think of any activity that's more immersive than going for a swim or exmersive than going for a beer. So you got that wonderful blend of experiences that I think the metaverse needs to speak to these elements of the water, because they're the most, how would I say, the most all-encompassing, the most immersive experience you could have as a human being, I think, is going for a swim. Yeah. And the most exmersive experience is having a beer.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So you've hit on exmersion and immersion right very squarely there. And I think if we frame the metaverse in this context, if we contextualize the metaverse in terms of this slide that you've got on the screen right now should be slide number 1 on what is the metaverse.
Yeah, actually, we are trying to probably the first standard we should create for metaverse is the definition of metaverse. But for now, I believe there are maybe dozens of different definitions. And Steve, you are also invited to be one of 10 top experts. We're talking about the metaverse in the report.
Yes, I saw a response, and I'll get it to you soon.
I know. Yeah, I'm not reminding you for that. I just wanted to say that my expectation is that every expert will give his or her own definition of metaverse. That'll be very interesting. I can't wait to see all the input from the 10 top experts we invited. And based on that, probably we could develop some consensus regarding the definition of metaverse. I think that should be giving the industry. So many people are talking about the metaverse. but we should give them the vision, the right vision, what the metaverse should be. Some people are talking for many reasons. They just wanted to tie some existing thing with the metaverse. I don't think that is right. We need to give people the right vision, the right definition.
Well, in the dictionary it just says shared VR, but if anything, it's more XR, really, extended reality, I think, rather than VR, because I think back in 1991, Charles Wyckoff and I came up with the idea of X reality, extended reality.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought like that might frame it. A lot of people now are moving towards our notion of XR in the VR, AR, MR sort of space. So if we sort of take extended reality as our framework, we could think of it in that way, that if the metaverse was a shared XR space, also the meta, I think, has to come in where it's sensing sensors and sensing their capacity to sense, meta vision and meta sensing. I think there's a lot there in the slide you've got on the screen right now that we could address in terms of meta sensing and metavalence and metavalogrammetry.
Yeah. I still recall the paper we co-authored. Well, actually, you were the leading author, but there were some fantastic diagrams there. You gave a bunch of definitions for, like you just mentioned, and I also share the observation that XR is probably a more relevant term. As I mentioned before, well, I was the guy who initiated those VR and AR working group and the advisory board within IEEE. But I was a supporter rather than a leader in the most recent global initiative on ethics of XR. So that's also an evidence that people would prefer XR to cover VR and AR and MR. So I agree with that. Yes.
Yeah, that'll be good. It's too bad Charles Wyckoff isn't still alive now, but him and I kind of were the ones that came up with XR as extended reality, and it would be kind of neat. He was a real genius in this kind of stuff too. He would have had a lot to say about what we're talking about right now. But in any case, if we think of it as a shared immersive, I would almost say that the metaverse is a shared immersive XR cyborg space. Web 3.0 shared XR immersive. And then you immersive and exmersive, I guess, really, inside and out. If we can get there, that it would be cool if we can come up with a context for it, because then maybe we can form a working group for XR metaverse or something like that.
Yeah. So actually, I have some plan under the to be established Open Metaverse Initiative. So there will be a fast track mechanism within the Open Metaverse Initiative, which will allow us to develop standards in a more free and open and faster way. And after that, we use some IEEE program to make those standards be adopted as IEEE standards. So that's one of the important functions I'm planning under the Open Metaverse Initiative.
Oh, that'd be great. Maybe there's a way we could get some ideas out quickly in terms of fast tracking, and then let the details come a bit later.
Yeah. By the way, so just also as a heads up, under the Open Metaverse Initiative, there will be its own advisory board. So I'm going to invite you to be on this advisory board as well for the Open Metaverse Initiative.
That'd be fantastic. That'd be a lot of fun.
We will.
Super.
Yeah.
That would be super fun. Yeah, we got to get together and hammer out some ideas. You coming to Toronto anytime soon?
Yeah. Well, where are you now, physically?
So right now I'm in Toronto. I'm back and forth between Silicon Valley. I do have a lab in Shenzhen and a lab in Xiamen, but I haven't been there for a while. And I do have a lab in Silicon Valley in California. But I'm spending most of my time now in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. and this waterhci initiative is kind of Ontario based anyway. Because Ontario is water capital of the world in many ways. Toronto's center of Ontario to some degree. So there's a lot of reason for this being here. But yeah, I don't know if you're planning to be in the area anytime soon, but it would certainly be fun to connect.
Well, I think probably we can have a physical beer together in June timeframe. I believe I have a meeting in Toronto in June. I think.
Excellent.
I can recall. Yes.
Yeah. So you know what? Give me some heads up. You know what we can almost do is have another kind of an event there, like we can maybe make some kind of metaverse conference or something in Toronto or in June, and include a swim op there.
Yeah. Well, let me think about that. Yes, because we used to be organizing some outreach activities along with the Standards Association meetings. I believe the June meeting is our Standards Board meeting, but probably, let me think about, probably we can organize a side forum addressing the metaverse, and it's not a big forum, but it would be, the audience would be important people from the industry. Let's go back to the IEEE staff to say if we can do that in Toronto in June. And I will.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. That would be really good. We could get, what we could do is we could get some of the big facilities at University of Toronto, and then maybe we could also tie into Ontario Place and have part of it take place in Ontario Place. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I will keep you posted. That's great.
Yeah.
That would be very great.
Yeah, that would be fun. Looking forward to it. Okay, well, that was a really great talk. That really, that was absolutely wonderful, and I think everybody enjoyed it. I think we've covered all the questions that everybody had, and yeah, I guess this concludes our wonderful waterhci 2022, and yeah. Let's all stay in touch, and I think we can all form a community together and really connect on immersive metaverse and all kinds of other things.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So much fun. Okay.